Good morning. I feel like we've already had the service. I'm done. We're good. I would like to start with our monthly affirmation on gratitude. So this will be the last Sunday that we have a focus on gratitude. So let's all say our affirmation together. I am worthy of gratitude. I deserve to give and receive thanks, and I claim my blessings now. And I trust that each of you had plenty to be thankful for this week. I want to kick off this morning with a story from the Hasidic Tales, which is a collection of stories by Rabbi Rami Shapiro. And this story is one that he collected that was told originally by Reb Hennock of Alexander. The story goes thusly. This is how Reb Hennock told it. There was once a fellow who was so very forgetful indeed. His memory was so short that when he awoke each morning, he could not remember where he had laid his clothes the night before. Things got so bad for him that he could not fall asleep. So great was his nervousness about finding his things upon waking. One evening, however, he hit on a great idea. Taking a pencil and paper, he wrote down exactly where he had placed each item of clothing. Placing his notes on the nightstand by his bed, he quickly fell asleep, confident that he would find everything just perfectly in the morning. And indeed, he did. He woke up, took the notes from the nightstand, and read off each item in turn. Pants on the chair back, and there they were. He put them on. Shirt on the bedpost, and there it was. He put it on. Hat on the desk, and there it sat. He placed it on his head. In a few minutes, the fellow was completely dressed. But suddenly, a great dread came upon him. Yes, he said aloud, here are my pants, my shirt, and my cap. But where am I? He looked and looked and looked, but he couldn't find himself anywhere. Reb Hennock would pause for a moment here and then would conclude, and that is how it is with each of us. We can find our things. We can see that which is around us, but can we see ourselves? Can we find ourselves and find our place in this universe? As noted, this week today wraps up our month of gratitude. It also marks the first week of Advent, as Michael noted and so beautifully presented. A few weeks back, I was given the title of You Are Here. Sometimes things just kind of download, and the concept had come through a while back. And I knew the topic was about our place in the universe and how we show up. And that topic had arrived well before I had last weekend's seminary class. So in our class last weekend, a large portion of the focus was on being present with the people around us, being open to listening, being simply with people. And we did a lot of exercise, a lot of breaking off in pairs and talking to each other, sharing. Things got very vulnerable, very open. And there was a point where I was in one exercise with a classmate named Sophia, and she was listening to me as I was basically airing all of the things that I think I don't do well enough. And I just let her listen to all of those doubts, all of the things, all of those little things in the back of your head that's just like, you're not enough, right? So, and as much as I know these things, somewhere back in the brain, those things still abide. As much as we work on it, they can still come up because we have that shadow to deal with. Sophia did a beautiful job listening, and then she was closing out that session with a prayer. And as she was doing her prayer, about halfway through, she said multiple times, God, we know you have our back. God, you have our back. Now, for a lot of people, that's just a lovely phrase, and it is, and it's a true sentiment. But for me, that phrase hit home because as an improviser, before we take the stage, that is the last thing we say to each other. We literally go around the group, pat each other on the back, and say, got your back. In the improv world, at least in our CSZ world, when somebody is suffering something greatly, there's some misfortune that has befallen them, they're needing support, the entire community reaches out and says, we've got your back. So that little phrase showing up was not coincidental to me, and I just started crying, the tears. So it was a lovely session, and we went back, this is all through Zoom, by the way, so we went back into the big Zoom room where everybody's there with a chance to share. And one of my classmates, Trista, was sharing about her experience in talking with someone. And in that case, the person she was paired with had wanted to open with a prayer as they were starting their session. And Trista, being in charge, was supposed to be giving the prayer. Now, her partner was of a specific faith tradition that Trista doesn't normally have any connection to. But in that moment, somehow sitting on her desk in front of her happened to be a prayer from that faith tradition that she simply read out. The minister who was facilitating heard that story and he said, oh, of course, the universe has your back. To which I said, okay, I get it. You've got my back. I've got it. There are no coincidences, right? And the more that we align with Spirit, the more those things will happen. We are each one very tiny piece of this universe, and yet reflected in each of you is the entire universe itself. Albert Einstein said, a human being is part of the whole called by us the universe, a part limited in time and space. They experience themselves, their thoughts and feelings as something separated from the rest, a kind of optical delusion of their consciousness. This delusion is a kind of prison for us, restricting us to our personal desires and to affection for a few persons nearest to us. Our task must be to free ourselves from this prison by widening our circle of compassion, to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature in its beauty. Nobody is able to achieve this completely, but the striving for such achievement is in itself a part of the liberation and a foundation for inner security. So our separation, as we know, as we constantly know, but we have to keep being reminded, our separation is an illusion, or in this case, a delusion. But being able to strive, to work toward seeing all of the beauty in everyone and in everything, that is liberating in and of itself. So I talked about being able to see our things. I can see where my pants are, I see where my hat is, but where am I? So this separation view, this viewing ourselves as separate from the world, this delusion of separateness, brings about this division, right? The worldly and the spiritual. So we've talked often about those two parts of ourselves. We are spiritual beings having this very human experience. And I think sometimes, speaking for myself, I try to view those parts as these separate entities, and I address each. But the reality is, all of the spiritual side is overlaid entirely on top of our humanness. It's all there integrated throughout. There is no real separation of it. It's seeing the humanness through the lens of the spiritual. There's a song that most of us know and love called Holy Now. Everything is holy now. You can see the smallest thing and realize that it is a miracle. You are a miracle. But you have to see that through that spiritual lens. We are all part of that wholeness, part of that allness of the universe. In Matthew 6:19 through 21, it says, "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moths and vermin destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moths and vermin do not destroy and where thieves do not break in to steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." So, just very quickly, according to unity metaphysics, what we're talking about, which is probably obvious to many of you, but the treasures in heaven are that rich store of these divine ideas. That is our treasure in heaven, those ideas, the thoughts held in mind, and of course thoughts held in mind produce after their kind. So when we hold those thoughts in mind and in heart, that brings about these true actions from the background of the Christ character and individuality. And then where the heart is, the treasure is also relates to that whatever our thoughts are set upon comes to mean more to us. So when you focus on those true ideas, when you focus in on those higher ideals, that's where your heart sets as well. The feeling follows through. The feelings will cluster around that idea like a nucleus, and thus the heart is with that treasure. Now, in looking at that metaphysical explanation, I'd been reminded when it talked about literally the feelings, the heart clustering around that idea, reminded me of a model that I've spoken of before. It's a Steve Behrman model. He's a psychologist out of San Francisco that certainly helps me to sort of view life and myself and the world. But it starts with our body in the middle, and around that clusters our feelings. And around that, we have our rational mind, which can see all the things within, in the deeper part of the circle. And then beyond the rational mind, we have the trans-rational mind, that mindset that sees the biggest picture. It doesn't get involved in all of the ego things. It's actually looking at that broader scope. And then, as stream of consciousness goes, thinking of that model reminded me of another saying, one that I've heard for years, but I had not really looked into much until working on this talk. The saying is, "God is an infinite sphere whose center is everywhere and whose circumference is nowhere." Is that familiar to anybody else? Okay, a few hands, great. Does anybody know where that came from? Because my original understanding when I'd heard that was, oh, that's something Voltaire said, which is true, although I believe Voltaire said circle instead of sphere, but that much is true. Voltaire is, of course, like 18th century French writer and philosopher, but the concept is so much older than the 18th century. So in going back to research where it came from, the oldest reference that I could find goes back to, it was Diogenes Laertius, who was talking about Xenophanes, the philosopher, who lived 570 to 478 BC. And what Xenophanes had said was, "The substance of God is spherical, in no way resembling man. He is all eye and ear, but does not breathe. He is the totality of mind, thought, and is eternal." There's something similar a few centuries later, 3rd century, when Plotinus wrote, "The soul is not a circle in the sense of the geometric figure, but in that it at once contains the primal nature as center and is contained by it as circumference." The primal nature is the center, and it's contained by it as circumference. Or 12th century French philosopher, so 600 years before Voltaire, who said, "God is an intelligible sphere whose center is everywhere and whose circumference is nowhere." This is an old thought. What does it mean to have God centered everywhere with a circumference of nowhere? And with all due respect to Plotinus, who said that this is not a geometrical sphere. If I remember my geometry correctly, the definition of a sphere is a body who has a center point and all of the outer edges are equidistant from that center point. Just because that distance is infinity doesn't make it any less a sphere. It fits that definition. Infinity is equidistant from that center point. So, the idea being, if the center is everywhere, the center is you. You are the God center. You are the center of the universe because it extends out in infinite directions from you. We often don't see ourselves that way. A few might. And we usually condemn them for thinking they're the center of everything. But if God's center is everywhere, that makes you centered in God, and God centered in you. Wherever you go, there you are. And wherever you go, God is, and all is well. And yet, saying these things is one thing. Intellectualizing it is one thing. How do you keep it in your heart? How do you keep that idea so forward that your heart centers around it so that is where your treasure is? Because I've got to say, the world is a place that will beat you up. Last week, Club Q shootings out in Colorado Springs tore my heart out. Since then, Walmart shootings in Virginia, other lesser-known shootings all over. People behaving in horrible ways, doing terrible things to other people. How do we see God in that? If God is centered everywhere, how is God centered there? How do we see that? How do we hold that? One thing that I see in those actions is pain. Obviously, the pain caused. But oftentimes, the person who is inflicting the damage is also in pain. That saying, hurt people hurt people. That's not to let somebody off the hook for doing something terrible. It's for us to remember, perhaps there's a way that we can make it better before it happens. Maybe there's a way that we can show up for people and give them a chance to express their pain. Maybe we can be those listeners, like I was working with last week, where somebody just has the space to share everything going on so they don't have it bottled up, so there's not this pain. Because pain, grief, all of those emotions, if you try to stuff them in, what happens? Dina, yeah. They will find a way. All of that hurt will find a way to come out. So we've got to find ways to center ourselves in it. Center ourselves in God. Faith, hope, gratitude. These are all ways to center ourselves in God so that we can deal with our own baggage, our own pain, our own wounds, and we can be present with people to be there for their pain, their wounds, their baggage. I have a dear friend. Her name is Mia. We've known each other for what feels like ever. It's probably 35 plus years. And we've seen all of the good, the bad, the highs, the lows, the births, the deaths, the major religious experiences, everything. And Mia has not had an easy life in so many ways. One of the things that she has been very public about is about 20 years ago, she was diagnosed with MS. And for anybody that knows MS or knows people with MS, it is a very unpredictable disease. It can leave you feeling great one day and unable to get out of bed the next. there are all kinds of things that go along with it. And that's simply one aspect of what she has dealt with. So this friend of mine, after I had taken a chant workshop from the wonderful Karen Drucker, she had encouraged us to write chants for friends. And so I'd reached out to Mia and I said, I want to go ahead and write something for you. I said, it'd just be a simple chant, but what do you need? And this was just a few years ago. And she said, I just am so grateful to still be here. There were so many times when she thought she wouldn't be, from all of her health challenges, all of the other things that had come up. And she said, I'm grateful that I am still here with us. And so I wrote a very simple chant for her. We're going to go ahead and use that chant. Michael, if you want to come up. But this chant, although simple, encapsulates hope and faith and gratitude. And I figured what better way to finish out this month than with those things. So if you want to go ahead and settle in, get your feet flat on the floor. Hands in your lap, palms up. If you're comfortable doing so, close your eyes. Take a nice deep breath and let that out. And I want you to breathe in through that heart center. That heart that will cluster around those highest ideas, those thoughts held in mind. Breathe in deeply through that heart center and out. And if it feels right, let my words be your words. I totally accept and believe that God is working in me, as me, through me, and through all beings and all creation to bring me to my highest good. Hope dawns within me and leads me to deepen in faith. I am worthy of gratitude. I deserve to give and receive thanks. And I claim my blessings now. Thank you, God. I am grateful. And now listen as Michael sings the song for Mia a couple of times through.
I'm so grateful. I am here. Thank you for everything. I am here and I am grateful. I'm so grateful. Thank you for everything.
And now, if you are comfortable doing so, I want you to join in singing with Michael. We will sing this multiple times through. If you are not comfortable singing, simply listen to the words and let it resonate in your heart.
And I am grateful. I'm so grateful. I am here. Thank you for everything. I am here and I am grateful. I'm so grateful. I so grateful. I am here. Thank you for everything. I am here and I am grateful. I'm so grateful. I am here. Thank you for everything. I am here and I am grateful. I'm so grateful. I am here. Thank you for everything.
Breathe in faith, hope, and gratitude. As your focus returns to the room, I want to return to the scripture from the Daily Word, Romans 15:13. May the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace in believing, so that you may abound in hope by the power of the Holy Spirit. And to quote Eric Butterworth from his talk, Living in a Prodigal Universe, when you go forth in this consciousness, you remind yourself many times over, no matter how involved you get in the limitations of things out there, you're living in substance which is limitless. The prodigal universe, lavish, generous, abundant, profuse, bounteous, limitless, inexhaustible, affluent, luxuriant, and it's beautiful. Wherever you go, God is centered, and all is well. And so it is. Namaste.